Welcome back to The Intentional Creator, everyone. Today we're going to be speaking about how to find your target audience. Or not even how to choose your target audience. I think this is a choice, and this is something that both Jackson and I need to get clear on for this podcast, because I feel like we're making all of these like kind of relevant podcast topics that relate to each other, but it's like, okay, who is this actually for? And like, I think as soon as you get clear on who your audience is, you can start creating content that is very specific to them and helps their problems and needs. And so you just have greater impact with the content that you make. That's what we're talking about.
Landing.
Yeah. But hi, Jackson. How's it going? Welcome to the podcast. Sorry, I just dove right into
jumped
that.
It. We could just jump right into it.
We can jump
I'm good.
right into it.
Things have been busy this past month. I've been shuffling and juggling jobs and housing situations, and I'm still at the spot I'm at, but I've just been supporting homies, and like things have kind of felt all over the place, but feeling good, feeling super creatively juiced up and ready for some kind of calmer waters to really channel all that creativity. Mm-hmm. So feeling excited about that. But
juiced up, yeah, I like that. I like that term. I'm going to start using that more. I'm feeling super juiced up.
Dude, this morning I'm juiced up.
But yeah, anyway, so it sounds like just getting back into the flow of things and getting really clear on just getting more clarity and getting, again, more intentional. It's like every episode is saying the same thing, but like I feel like it's a never ending journey of getting more and more intentional and more clear with what you're doing. Yeah, so I think for those of you listening, like I said, Jackson and I really need to have this conversation of who are we making this podcast for? And so we're almost going to use ourselves as an example, just having a conversation between ourselves, and hopefully
case study.
Yeah, hopefully you can take some of what we're having throughout the conversation and apply that to your own business, your own personal brand, whatever it is that you're trying to do with your creativity, and figure out who you are creating for as well. So yeah, I guess just like from the start, I guess we can kind of both ask each other questions, but in your mind, like, who is the ideal person that we're creating this for? Like straight off the top of your head.
Straight off the top of my head, it's like everybody.
Sure. Yeah.
But that's a super broad and not really relevant or helpful like response. I mean, I think that the concept of intentional creativity is everyone. I think the practicality of that in today's modern age is content creators / people who are intentionally moving towards creating a self-sustained business online with their expression, whatever that might be. That's how I think about it.
So you see it as
like they're using.
You see it as like individual people, not necessarily businesses.
I think I do see it as individual people. I think those lines are kind of getting blurred, but I also see that's just where I'm coming from in the sense of how I've interacted with social media and business and intentional creativity. I also totally understand and could see how that could apply to businesses outside of that. Yeah. In the sense of like businesses as well could be intentionally creating through their brand and through their marketplace. So I should broaden that scope to just saying anyone who's working with anyone, any entity, any business structure that's moving towards some sort of online presence in a really consistent and trustworthy way. Because all businesses want to have some sort of trust they can hold for their audience and for their clientele, quote unquote, for their viewers. And so that trust is what's important. And I think that the intentionality from the creator or the business standpoint or the whoever's running the company, that's super important to build that trust. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How do you see it?
I think I love that answer, but it still sounds like everyone.
It's so vague. It's so vague.
Yeah,
right.
Which is difficult because it does apply to everyone on social media, but it's like even people that are creating on social media and businesses, like there's different kinds of businesses within that as well. So it's like, do we focus specifically on like quote unquote organic brands, or like conscious brands, or creators, or businesses that help connect people to nature? So it's like, what's the really specific kinds of people? Like if we had to create like an ideal customer or ideal listener of this podcast, like who is that person?
Who would it be?
It's like, is it somebody that's like a yoga instructor, or is it somebody that is running their own outdoor business and is trying to like get their social media going? Or is it somebody that just started like a cooking blog? It's like, it could be all of those. But I think, again, if we can get really specific, then we can start talking to that yoga instructor's specific needs, or the cooking channel's specific needs. And we don't even need to get that specific. I just think...
Well, where's the line that we're walking of ultra specific kind of action towards one specific brand, and also the broad concept of, and I think that's probably what we're trying to find in this conversation, is like, who is that audience?
Yeah.
That we can both be in a broad stroke to, but also a really specific, practical, like, like if you run a yoga brand, this is how it could look, and this is how it could roll.
I think something else that we have to think about is like, what is the vision for this podcast? Like, do we want to turn this into more than just a podcast and like actually helping and consulting people, or is it just a podcast and like this is all we're gonna do? Because like that impacts what and why we're making content.
Absolutely.
Because it's like, if we wanted to do this as a business and do like a consultancy firm for intentional creation, or even like having the full on like studio and doing the content creation as well, that could be cool. But yeah, then at that point it's like, almost, are we targeting individuals or businesses? And again, I still think it can be both, or it could be individuals that are running businesses as individuals.
Kind of like how we were /are in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's like using social media to further your career, not just using social media to get hype or like just get a following or like be on it. So I think
I think that there's a couple...
Putting myself in the shoes of somebody that might be listening to this podcast, they are trying to better their own social media presence to have a greater impact for a specific reason, which is most likely business career related. Otherwise, why would they be doing it? Well,
other than just to try to be creative.
That too.
They just need
that's true.
They just need an expressive place to let things out. Like one of my sisters is really...
That's true.
That's totally what she uses social media for. She doesn't care about what anybody else thinks. It's just like, what's up?
So then there's two really different people right there. It's like people that are using it purely for creative expression, and then people that are using it for their careers, and trying to use it to grow their businesses. So,
well, and I totally feel myself caught in the middle of that even sometimes too, where I'm like, I know that this is a business, but I also know that this is just something I need. And I kind of go back and forth in that.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Constantly and all the time, and trying to figure out what that flow looks like and how that flow feels, of just like, okay, this is a stupid meme, but it's funny and I want to put it up. It's like, this is what I want to do. You know what I mean? But also, maybe it's not super professional.
Yeah.
And I think that there's like I kind of want to go back to the business thing, because I think getting clear on that business thing in the sense of how we're using this podcast will help us create the specificity. Wow, this is going to be an anemone. The specificity around what the audience is. So in the sense of like how we design the business will help us get clarity on what, at least this is how my mind works in it, how we design the business will help us get clarity around what audience we're moving towards and who we're trying to help support.
Exactly.
And I think that kind of is like a weird branch off from the original point of this conversation of like what's the audience, but it's like I think that that's an important part of it, and I think that's how finding your audience works is like, well, what's the vision behind the main meat of the actual company thing, quote unquote, or like vision of what we're doing. And then that kind of tells you, okay, that's what the intention behind it is. Because how I think about it is that this podcast is more along the lines of the creative expression side. So in the sense of like the actual podcast part of it is just like us chopping it up, talking as creatives, having the business conversations too, and putting those in there, but also just like getting on the phone with people think are cool and like just chatting it up and hear about their creative process. Like example, my sister, we haven't done that yet, but that would be cool to just like, yo, how do you do it? Like, how does it roll? How does it feel? That kind of thing. And then almost like a studio does multiple different things. We have these other elements of what the company of intentional creativity or the intentional creator does. And we can be specifically helping people get, and then that's where we can be specifically helping certain people who are creators developing more intentional creative content strategies so that they can feel more aligned with themselves but also feel like they're growing on social media.
So maybe the plan is to create for the individual creator, and then obviously that can apply to bigger businesses, and then hopefully in the future be able to consult businesses that have money to spend. Because like, I mean, it would be cool to consult individual people as well. Obviously they just aren't going to have the same money that businesses will have, and not that it's like all about the money, but
well, I know, but to make
this
it's not all about the money, but it's also like how are we sustaining ourselves. That's part of the conversation. That's part of the creative conversation in a lot of ways, consulting individual creators.
Because like there is something to be said for like even online creativity schools and stuff like that. Like there's this channel I follow on YouTube called The Future, and they've kind of created a school based on creative business. And I really love and support that, and I think it's great what they're doing. And that's targeted towards individual people that are trying to start businesses. So we could kind of take like that same route, where they are speaking to the individual, but it's like business advice for the individual, or in our case, intentional business advice for the individual. But then again, it comes back to business and not expressive creativity.
I wonder if we couldn't Well, I think like in everything with this podcast that we found so far is like this literally just started with conversations that you and I were having, and then it's grown into this thing where all of a sudden we're like, wow, this is actually really valuable information. We should talk about it more. And now it's a podcast that we're doing. And I kind of feel like in the same way it'll kind of keep growing and evolving like that. Like I don't necessarily know or have the answers to how does this work from a business standpoint. I mean, not that I am putting those answers outside of me, but in the sense of like, I think the more we play with the conversation, the more clarity will come through in the sense of what our audience would look like and how our audience will feel.
I think what I feel like we might just need like more direction. Like where are we going? Because right now, like all the conversations are great, but it feels like very scattered, and it's like we're just having the conversations, which is fine as well if we want to do that for like another year and just like get a solid base and foundation, and then we can move closer to a specific direction.
Right.
And like that's fine if we want to like take the first year of this podcast and just experiment and like talk about everything.
No, but I hear you, and I don't necessarily want to do that. Although I'm kind of thinking like, how can we? It's funny. This is a conversation we're having on the podcast, but I definitely do think this is like a conversation you and I are having in general right now. With like as we're in the dialogues that we're having, we're chatting through this kind of like, okay, how does this work as a business? How does this work? What does this look like? How does the form of this work? How does it make sense? And how does it lock in? I'm kind of wondering if we kind of... I feel as if it is such a broad conversation, and it's a really weird conversation to be having, because it does feel both very direct, of like, this is a really applicable conversation, like how do you use social media intentionally, but that's such a broad conversation. Like, it's like a really powerful question, but it's also a really big one. It's a really big, broad conversation. And so I'm kind of wondering if we maybe kind of have our feet in both of them and use the podcast to be asking questions and using it as a case study. So we start having more people on the podcast. We start actually interviewing people in a different way. And we have maybe a set of questions that are specifically designed to A, help them think about their creativity differently, but also B, to help us hear and listen to who the audience is and what the audience looks like. And then we can be using our network to connect with those people and find those people. And so then that can help us build better clarity around what and how the specifics of the products that we're offering can look like. And so maybe that's a way we can like still use the podcast to be in this kind of broad stroked way, but then there's also some direction behind.
So it's almost being reactionary to what works, and like letting the audience guide what.
Well, I don't know if I'm saying like let's just react to whatever the audience is saying. I'm just saying in the sense of like, let's listen to what other creatives are doing, hear what other creators are doing, and also be gleaning throughout those conversations that we're having. Okay, what are they saying? What is he saying? What is she saying? How can we pick out and hear a theme in this? And how can we hear like resonances and how the painter is doing things, the yoga instructor is doing things, the dubstep artist is doing things. How can we and the theme is going to be something along the lines of social media and how to use it.
And I think trying to get deep on like first of all, what their thoughts are on social media in the current days, and like second of all, what they are struggling with specifically on social media. So like if we have these interviews and ask those questions, like, oh, like what's the biggest challenge you find on social media? And they might say like, oh, just really low engagement, or I'm putting in all this work and nothing's happening, or I just can't seem to settle on a style, whatever it is. Then like those struggle points are like the things that we should be speaking about, because that's speaking to the people directly about the struggles that they're having. Because I think basically I want to be providing as much value in these podcasts as possible, so it's not just like rambling conversations. I think all of our podcasts have had really good value, but I want to be like even more succinct about like, okay, this is what we're talking about, this is the problem that we're helping you solve. Listen to this for half an hour, not even 45 minutes or an hour. Half an hour, here's the points, bang, 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 here's the conversation. Take it. I think I just want to be...
Yeah, because the rambling conversation doesn't give people anything to really like sink their teeth into.
Yeah, I just want to be more impactful with the effort we're putting in at the end of the day. Because it's like, not that this is like high stress or high volume of work, but it's still like we're putting an hour or two into this every week, and it's like I want that to count, and I don't want to record these podcasts and then like two people listen to it, or one person. Because I do believe it is good information, so I just like want to get clear on really helping people, and then like creating more of an impact.
It's time for us to be maybe it's time for us to use ourselves as a case study, and like how can we get clearer on what our business content strategy is, while also being clear on like what our relationship to flow is. Like how can you and I get clearer on like, okay, how are we navigating the different places we're both at in our personal lives, while also navigating the content beast's needs of what you have to kind of do to be producing content consistently. I think that conversation is definitely opening up for me in the sense of like things are kind of closing down in other aspects of my life, and I can be kind of moving more, and I am going to be moving more towards content production and creation. That's where I'm reorienting a lot of my energy. So I think maybe that could be part of it. It was just like using ourselves as a case study of just like, okay, this is how we're thinking about our content. This is how we're thinking about our content with the busyness of our lives.
So tell me, let's do that. Tell me about you. Who would you say is your target audience? Who are you trying to create for?
I'm still I'm still figuring that out. I'm still figuring out who I'm trying to create for, and I think that that's probably a lot of like maybe not a lot, but maybe that's some of where this kind of like vagueness is coming through. I definitely feel like I have a very like kind of vague, broad impact and stroke in most to all of my relationships right now, because I'm still kind of unsure as to like how I'm coming back in and plugging back in. I think that my photography audience is and always was the same, right? That's just like the people who are interested in beautiful images and photography and doing cool things. I'm in all sorts of different kind of environments and worlds right now in Boulder, and just doing a lot of different kind of festival work and music production stuff. And so I guess I would say the biggest audience that I'm working with directly right now are musicians, and photographing musicians and working with content, helping musicians create content and be in the content field and in the content world. I think my desired target audience is it's still so broad.
Yeah, it's tough, like as a creative as well, where you want to do so many different things.
Well, I want to do so many different things, and I want to talk to everybody. Yeah. I love it. I'm like, yo, how can I get everybody involved, dude? Like Kamala Harris is my target audience. Like everybody, politics, like everybody's my target audience, which is just obviously way too broad, and you have to have specifics in the sense of what you're creating for. I would say my target audience is driven entrepreneurship creatives. That
sounds like what this podcast target audience should be. Driven entrepreneurial creatives. I like that.
Those kind of people are like people I want to resonate with, and I want to connect with, and I want to be thinking in the same kind of field of. I want to feel some sort of creativity off you, but I also want to feel the sense of like you have the ability to tap into the business mind as well. I don't want to just feel your creativity necessarily just because I'm like, okay, well, you're kind of just like lit up in your creative world, and like there's no practicality that's coming through. Yeah, I know what that feels like because that's been a lot of what my experience has been with myself the past few years. Of just kind of like, man, I'm just lit up on creativity, but I really am not like
juiced up
in any sort of business way. Again, which is fine and good, and that's part of the creative process. And I'm not judging it. I'm just saying like, okay, at this point now, I'm ready to bring that business side back online in a really strong way.
Because that also gives you like. Again, the sustainability aspect of it, which is such a big part of intentional creation, is like it needs to be sustainable both physically, like actually producing the work, mentally, emotionally, and financially. I think a lot of artists forget about financial stability, and they're like, oh, I'll just create to create. But it's like, if you're not being sustained financially, you can't really just keep creating. It gets difficult and gets complicated. So I think figuring out a way to sustain yourself financially is a very important part of creating intentionally as well and sustainably.
Yep. Well, and part of that too is like, like both you and I are coming at it from different vantage points in a lot of ways now. Like you're still sustaining yourself through your creativity in a lot of ways. And I'm I took a step back all those years ago from the creative financial support and now stepping back into my creativity, but I'm intentionally trying to not rely on my creativity to do the finances of all of it, so that then my creativity can do whatever it wants and I don't necessarily need a target audience.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing as well. It's like, if you choose intentionally to not let money be a factor, then it's like, okay, then you don't really need a target audience.
Right.
I mean, you can still, it's always good to have one if you want to have your creative work be impactful, but if there's no like money tied to it really, then it's like, yeah, just do what you want.
Right.
And we've said this in other podcasts, like you don't need to create for money. But if you do want it to be a part of your life consistently, or if you want to make it your business, then you need money. Like you can't just be working for free all the time.
And I would like to say that like my end goal is to not be never financially supported through creativity again. Mm-hmm. That's not my goal. My goal is to be in a place where I have the means to be supported creatively, with finances as well. Mm-hmm. But I think that what I recognized was that and this is probably a whole podcast in itself. I think part of the creative process is, for some people, is recognizing that they want their creativity to express. Wait, where'd the thought go? Hold on.
Juice it up. Gone forever?
No. Hold on. It's right there. It's right there. 1 second. Just gotta quiet down. Fuck.
Expressing creativity. Financial stability.
There's this. Yeah. There's this business side of creativity that creates this is the whole conversation we're having today. It's like there's this business side of our creativity that's like, okay, now we're thinking about the audience. Mm-hmm. That's where our focus is.
Yeah.
We're thinking about the audience and trying to figure out what makes sense for them. Mm-hmm. But then there's this other creative part of you that doesn't actually care what anybody thinks about anything. It just wants to be creative.
Yeah. And
I think that, again, that's the kind of dialogue that we're in a lot of ways, and we're trying to sort through in this podcast is like, okay, so how do we be specific in a business stance, in a business sense, but also still allow for this fluidity of what creativity is, which is just creativity, and it just wants to flow and it just wants to happen.
Well, that's like the balance of like masculine and feminine energy as well as like pure creative versus structure and stability. It's like where we and the midway is the best place to be, where you have the balance of both.
Totally.
Yeah.
When I think that in the sense of like, how can we create the right container, basically?
Yeah.
What containers are we designing to have both sides of it? So maybe that's part of the conversation is like, what containers can we create that are pushing us into finding a target audience and finding clientele and finding people who really resonate with this and want to pay for this and want to have, this kind of support in their systems. Because like there's so many people who do want this, mm-hmm. like even roommates who live here and like people who I know, and I'm sure people who who want this like
guidance,
support from people who understand social media and understand how to creativity and can help give them a sense of balance. And I totally see that from a business perspective of like, this is like a really powerful offering that we have, mm-hmm. and how can we create the right containers so that people can come in, really trust it, and really feel juiced up in their creative path to like take it to the next level for themselves. Mm. But then there's also this other container that we're holding with the intentional creator business that has this ability to just chat, to just like be like, well, this is what I'm feeling, and this is just because like I was having this crazy experience and had this dream last night, and now this creativity is flowing through. Mm-hmm. Super whatever out there kind of vibe. And I think maybe that's how we kind of approach it, is just like, okay, we've got these we've got, at least for now, these two containers of like, this is the one side of the page where we're just like letting creativity come out of us and flow and just like blah. And then there's this other side that's created this container where it's like, okay, well, here's the specifics from the business side that'll help create the stability, that'll help create the finances, that'll help create the masculinity of it all. Just like how it's created this space where we can really feel ourselves flourish in both of them.
It's funny because I see it almost as it's the difference between a Joe Rogan podcast and an Andrew Huberman podcast. Like Joe Rogan is like all on the creative side where it's like conversation just flows for hours and just goes to
with
the
whatever.
ends of the universe. Whereas like Andrew Huberman's like very focused, very practical, very here's the information. This is what I'm talking about. Cool. See you. So yeah, it's just like the balance between those, and it's just like with any forms of creativity, there's so many different ways to approach it. It's like, where do you land on that scale? Do you land like purely on value for the audience, or do you land on pure creative expression?
Yeah. And I think if we stay in either one of those permanently, it'll burn us out.
Yeah.
Like if we don't have our foot in both of those somehow, and not to say that we're like unstable having our feet in both of these, but like if we don't have an ability to like play with both of them, I think it'll kind of create a sense of like, okay, I'm kind of tired of this.
Yeah, because if you just
I'm tired of not having any sort of direction with this at all.
Yeah, if you just do the complete like value, then it's like, okay, this is really robotic and boring now. It's like not a nice fun conversation to be a part of. It's just like, oh, here's 3 ways to get more followers this week or something stupid.
And it's almost like it's kind of like, I'm gonna Gary V's kind of another example of like, okay, it's gotten a little robotic.
Yeah,
it's got a little robotic. We get it, you know. Be authentic, be yourself. But that's the only thing you're saying. It's like not, and I'm not saying that that's the only thing he's saying. Like I love Gary and whatever. Like I support him and all that sort of stuff. But there is a sense of like, okay, like I don't have to watch your videos anymore. I know what you're gonna say.
Yeah,
like I know what's gonna come out of you.
Yeah.
And so how can we keep that diversity alive in the sense of like what we're bringing through? And I think that, and maybe this could be a little bit of what we do today personally, it's just like, I think it does come back down to like, what containers are we creating? What's the studio side? What's the behind the scenes of this look like? What is the vision for that? Like what is the studio business aspect of this?
Yeah.
I think that this has grown beyond a podcast in our minds now.
Yeah.
But we haven't actually like sat down and had a conversation as to like, okay, what's the vision for that then? Like, what does that look like? How does that feel? Because then that will help give us our target quote unquote audience of what we want to do.
Yeah.
And I think like what I said, like driven entrepreneurial creatives, I think those are the people I want to be talking to anyways.
Yeah.
Like those are the people I want to be interacting with to begin with, and like would give me the ideas and the juice to like feed back into the flowy conversations of whatever wants to happen. That would feel really exciting. So I think maybe that is our target audience, and we just trying to figure out, okay, cool, that's our target audience. Now what are the steps, containers, pathway to magnetizing those people in?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's pretty good. And that's like the same struggle that we're having of like the balance between value and creative expression is the same struggle that this audience will be having, is entrepreneurial creatives. So it's like those are the things we should speak to.
Totally. And those are the people we want to get advice and feedback from, because it'll help us too.
Yeah.
It's like we're doing the same thing, and like how can we like ask these questions and gain more insight and help push more of this into the collective consciousness so that more people can like hear it and work with it.
Yeah. I like that. Cool. I'm feeling pretty good on entrepreneurial creatives as our target audience, and then speaking about themes of how to provide pure value, how to have structure while still being authentic in your creations and allowing your creative expression to flow.
Right.
That feels pretty good.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. Yeah. Yeah, because it gives a sense of clear direction as to like what we're working towards, and also it's the same stuff that we're working with.
Yeah.
In our own lives, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Just kind of like, this is where we're at, what we're navigating, what we're trying to move through.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to making content that speaks to how to be authentically creative, but still have an impact through your work, whether that's in a business sense or in a personal sense. Like if you're not trying to make money from it, but you still want to be impactful. Like if it's like a non-profit or like why can't I think of the word where it's like a cause for good activist position.
Yeah, that totally reads for me, and I think again, I feel like this conversation has kind of led us into this broader scope of what this podcast has turned into for both of us in our creative minds, of just like, okay, there's something more that we want to dig into with this, and it's not just this cool conversation that we're having. It's a real practical thing that a lot of us as driven entrepreneurial creatives struggle with and deal with, and how can we bring clarity around that value and clarity for other people so that we can all be thriving and moving in towards more abundance and more flow with our creative expression.
I like that. Cool. I think we pretty much settled that.
Yeah, it's funny, like there was a question that we're asking, but then it turned into like this really like this dissection of what we're working with right now.
Yeah, well, that's kind of how you figure out how to get there, and like
totally
getting really deep on it. It feels like we started with the question right here, and then we did this whole like long walk around like to come back to the same point of like, oh, it was right next to us. And it's like I feel like that happens so often with getting deep on your why. It's like you knew it was there the whole time, it just wasn't clear. And it's like, this is the way to go clear, is like go deep and like ask yourself why you're doing what you do, what the vision is for whatever you're doing,
right,
and then that can give you clarity on what you need to be doing now in order to get to that vision.
And what's practical and what's actually needed from your output.
Cool. I'm happy with that one.
Well, sweet.
Yeah,
that feels good. Yeah.
You want to wrap it up? I feel juiced up.
I feel juiced up and sauced in. Thanks for listening, guys.
Thank you so much.
Chat, as always, and
we'll see you in the next one.
I'm excited to have more of these. I'm excited to like drop into this deeper conversation that we've kind of opened up within ourselves, Dean.
Yeah.
And we'll see you guys at the next one with whatever else is coming.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Cheers.